With that being said, Jason, great to meet you, man. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Most definitely looking forward to it.
Me too, man. So before we get into your life as a speaker, strategist, author, all of the wonderful things you're doing, I always begin with this. 6 years ago, this pandemic was changing our lives. It was a fork in the road. How did you get through that era, and how has it changed the way that you work and live today?
Wow, yeah. The pandemic radically changed my life. Definitely. All the plans that I had were canceled, So I'm a musician
Okay.
and I had planned to I had tours scheduled. I had things that I was gonna do throughout the entire 2020. I was working at a particular job. I had left my job right before the pandemic because I was thinking I was going in that trajectory and that I was going to be going all in on music and on my entrepreneurial endeavors. And so when the pandemic happened, just like a couple weeks later, yeah, I wasn't prepared for it. For everything changing, and at that time nobody knew how long it was going to last.
Yep.
There's a lot of uncertainty. Went through some very difficult things during that time as well. I even went through a divorce at that time, after the pandemic started, and so it was pretty bad. Um, but I would say that through it all, though, the good thing that came out of it for me was that even though I was in a lot of very uncomfortable situations during that time, it actually propelled me more into my purpose, I believe, and really helped me to see things with more clarity. So it was a dark time, but like a time of like incredible growth for me.
When did you realize that? How long did it take for you to realize that this was actually a blessing in disguise?
It it took me maybe, I don't know, maybe like 6 months or so for me
Okay.
to really see it.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. So it was pretty quick. Yeah, I remember the beginning of that year. Everybody was like, oh, it's 2020. And they had the Barbara Walters thing. And you're watching 2020 and all of
Hmm.
that and how cutesy it was. And, being in jazz radio, I remember interviewing musicians. And one of the hardest things during that time period, because I ramped up my interviews in a way that I never did before, was
Hmm.
when people would tell me that literally their itinerary melted away in days. Like they would get reminders on their phone and they were just like, oh, man, like
Yeah.
festivals and European tours and
Hmm.
everything. Because at that point it was March, it was summer, spring. That's when it's time to shine. That's when the music, live music comes alive. So I can only imagine at that point, watching all that melt away is just like just surreal, you know?
Yeah, but what it did though is it changed my focus completely.
Yeah.
Because so what I did, and I'll say this, even though I said like about 6 months is when I really started to see how it could be beneficial to me. There were things along the way, very early on in the pandemic, that I saw that I said, you know what, all right, uh, it I think it what it did for me was it helped me to find my focus because I was thinking, right, I was like, what if something like this were to happen again? Okay, if I'm banking on just being able to like to tour and do stuff like that, that's not really feasible in this kind of situation. So what can I do that I can do from anywhere and I don't have to travel anywhere to do it? And I was thinking about what am I most passionate about? And at that time, that's when the light bulb switch I think for me came on. That was probably like maybe towards the end of March, early April during the pandemic. I started writing a book and it was a novel. It was my first novel. So, anything I had written before was nonfiction. And I had always wanted to write fiction. And so during that time, I wrote my first fiction manuscript at the beginning of the pandemic. And I remember thinking, you know what? This is what I was born to do.
Yeah.
If I can't do music, if I can't do anything else, what I know I really love doing is writing. That's something I've been passionate about my whole life. And so I think that for me, that was like a focus shift where I said, I'm gonna dedicate the rest of my life to writing. I'm gonna be writing as much as I possibly can. And so that's what I've been doing since.
And that's wisdom when you realign your reality, because we all go through these traumatic or um, these back steps in life, and it's all about how you
Hmm.
react to it.
Right.
Because you could be like, well, the music's going to come back. I'm going to keep doing what I did before. And it's that whole adage of the insanity, doing the same thing over and over with the same results.
Hmm.
The only way that you're going to get something different is if you do something different, because there's no way that any kind of calamity like a pandemic will shut down writing. You can do that whenever and however you want.
Right.
Yeah. So let's peel back the layers of what you do on a daily basis. And to do that, I'm going to put you in front of 12, 13-year-old kids. You're at career day, and one of the kids in the back of the room wants you to synthesize your day job to make sense to their brains.
Okay.
How do you
All
do
right.
that?
Sure. Sure. I think that I could do that pretty easily as during the day, I'm actually a teacher, and I work with high school students, and I teach science, and I also help special learners. Those who just need a little bit more support in the classroom. And one thing that I love to do is inspire students by helping them to think outside of the box. And I like to always say to them, I don't want to just tell you what to think, but I really want you to understand how to think so that anytime you hear anything, you can take that information and you're able uh, to use your own, reasoning and, use your own experiences that you've been through to help you. I really try to push the idea of critical thinking. And so if I were, saying this to 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, I would say just because you have a thought that comes into your mind, right? It doesn't mean that that is always the best solution or, what you should do, but it is good that you have recognized that thought. Now take some time to really sit with that thought and see how can I, dig a little bit deeper. Maybe somebody says something to you and it causes an emotional reaction. You get upset. Ask yourself, all right, why am I upset right now? Am I properly understanding what this person is saying to me? Or could I have misunderstood? Maybe I should ask a follow-up question just to see, because maybe I'm offended for no reason. Or maybe this person really was trying to offend me. So now what do I do? And this is something this is a real example I shared with some of my students recently. This thing has been in the news, the whole thing with Carmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf.
Yeah.
And I asked the students, I said, if you were in a situation like that, right? Because we see the outcome. It was very tragic. Somebody lost his life. It really didn't need to happen, but it all happened very fast. You have two teenagers. You got a lot of uh, just hormones, emotions, a lot of stuff going on, and it just happened very quick. You have one who lost his life, and you have another one who's in prison. How could this have been avoided? And I asked them, what if you were in a situation like that? Or if it was you and some of your friends and you were out somewhere? Like, what could you do to maybe de escalate a situation like that? What, like, looking at it, how could you see yourself in that way? And I tried not to tell them what I thought that they should do, but I really wanted them to tell me. And it was really interesting hearing all their responses.
Yeah. So what did you want to be when you were that age? What was your dream gig growing up?
Yeah, at that age, definitely music.
Yeah.
I was very into music. Um, I grew up listening to a lot of different music, but my favorite genres were always like punk rock, alternative rock, and hip hop. And so I like to make music in those genres, sometimes mash them up. And yeah, that's what I could that's what I saw myself doing at that time. And what I didn't see at that time was going to college or going any of the directions that I eventually went, towards. I couldn't have seen that at that time, because my own self-perception was I said I'm not capable of that. I had internalized, those false beliefs. Like I'm not cut out for college. I'm like I can barely get through school now, middle school and high school. Like I can't imagine doing this on purpose again, for more years. So it definitely took a mindset shift for me, which I'm thankful that I was able to get, you know, towards the end of my time in high school. I was really able to see my own potential more, and I started to believe in myself. But I do think that a lot of students struggle with that. I see it every day where, a kid just thinks that they just can't do something. And I never want to push that and encourage that. I like to say, you know what? I know that this is challenging, but you know that you can do it. You are capable. You are smart. And so sometimes that's all it takes, I've noticed. And with that little push, sometimes they say, okay, fine. All right, I'll try.
Well, and you're in that position to be that person that can see a student for who they are. And all of us
Hmm.
need that in life. Who was that for you? Did you have a moment where someone believed in you, saw you beneath all of the layers, and saw you for who you were? Did you have a moment like that?
I did. I did. I can think of a few occasions, but there was one teacher that I had in first grade that was very influential. And I remember this teacher, I told her that I had entered like what was it, like boxcar racing.
Yeah, yeah.
And I told her I had entered this competition, and there was a bunch of other guys that were in it. I was in the Boy Scouts at the time, so
Yep.
we were like competing against other Boy Scouts, and I'm pretty sure I don't know what place I was in. It was probably like 100 or something. I don't know.
Right.
I definitely didn't win,
Yeah. That's where I was
but
at.
yeah. But I remember I told her about it, and she was like, "Oh, okay." And then one day, she came to class, and she brought me a little trophy and a little ribbon that said number one.
Yeah.
And she gave it to me in front of the class, and she said, "Oh, I just want to congratulate Jason on his boxcar, racing. He did such a great job." And I just remember thinking, like, wow, like she went above and beyond. Like
Yeah.
even me, I'm a teacher now. I don't I don't do that. Maybe I should, but I was like, wow, she's really like she really cares about students. Her husband would come into the class sometimes, and he would tell us stories about different places he traveled to, and he would bring us like candy and stuff from like other countries.
Wow.
And so, I always thought like things like that were pretty cool. And I said, this is how much of an impact we can make, especially on impressionable people.
Yeah.
Because that was a very positive experience, but I've definitely had negative experiences too.
Yeah.
But at least I was able to compare it to something like that, so I knew what it was supposed to be.
So I'm curious. I want to go back and tap into that creative part of you, the dreamy world of getting into music and writing. What was
Hmm.
the first live show that you saw, the first concert that blew you away, that made you think, I want to be up there one day?
Yeah, I think the very first concert I went to, I believe this was the first concert. It was um it was Alanis Morissette and Radiohead.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. What year was that?
Yeah, that was I don't know, that was in the 90s.
Wow.
At some point I can't remember what year.
Wow.
Yeah, but it was a great show,
Yeah.
and I remember at that time, yeah, I wanted to learn how to play the guitar. Um, I ended up learning the drums first, and I actually started playing the guitar later. But I knew I said, I want to do music. I want to
Yeah.
make my own music, and so Yeah, I always saw myself doing that. And when I was in high school, that's when I really did start to make my own music and perform in a lot of different places and in different high schools and universities and like different events. And it was pretty nice, how I was able to kind of see that dream become a reality, and I was able to do what I loved, and I was still in school, so I couldn't really pursue it full time, but it gave me a taste of like what it could be like.
So, you're obviously highly motivated. Um, you dream big. You got a lot going on. What is that energy for you every day to live up to these expectations, to do the best you can, to change lives, to take care of the dreams that you have, your soul, all of that? What is that energy for you every day to do it at a high level?
Yeah, I definitely have high expectations for myself, and I think that that is very important. I believe that you have to reach as high as possible, even if you fall short of your goal, you know. And this is what I tell students all the time. They always ask me, how many points do I need to pass? And I say that's the wrong question.
Yeah,
Like you're shooting for what, a 70, you might get a 65 or a 60. Why not shoot for 100 and then maybe fall short and get a 90 or an 85?
yeah.
It's better to shoot for the highest thing. And so that's what I always try to do. I set unrealistic goals for myself, but I look at it like, life is short and tomorrow is not promised. I don't know how much time I'm going to have on earth. So I have so many ideas. I'm constantly working on different projects simultaneously. And I think the motivation is, you know what? I know that the things that I'm doing, they're going to impact someone else's life. So even at times where I feel tired or I'm just like, I don't know if I'm, really making a difference as much as I would like to, I say, you know what? Let me just keep going. Let me just keep going because I know that if this type of stuff is helpful for me, I know it will be helpful for others. So that motivates me to write, continue to publish books, to continue to, produce podcasts and make YouTube videos and anything like that where I can use my creative skills. That fuels me. Just knowing, you know what, this is going to make an impact.
So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into the 18-year-old version of you. You walk into a room and there's a film projector. You
Hmm.
click play and a 60-second highlight reel of the life you've lived. The choices you've made come up on the wall. Will that young version of you believe your life turned out this way?
Absolutely not.
Would you have any advice?
Meaning the 18-year-old me or the
Yeah, would you
current
tell
me?
your young version anything?
Yeah, no, I would say, you know what? Everything that you think is going to happen is not going to happen, but it's actually going to be better than what you think because your thinking right now is limited. Because at that time I only saw myself as a musician. I didn't really see myself as anything more than that. I didn't see myself as somebody who was going to, write books or to be a conference speaker or do anything like that. I couldn't, definitely not being a teacher, willingly putting myself back in high school that I just barely got out of. I said, no, I would never do something like that,
Yeah.
So I couldn't have imagined the way my life turned out, but it definitely it's better. And I would say that some of the very difficult things that I went through, I would not have wanted to go through at 18, thinking, I hope this never happens to me. But I can say that I'm glad that I did experience those things because it really helped to shape me into who I am. It really, going through the fire, it helps you to, build your integrity and to just be a stronger person and to be able to help others.
So on that 60-second highlight reel, what are you the proudest of? What are you the happiest about?
Yeah, I think that the one of the biggest things would be accomplishing things that I once thought were impossible, like um, going to graduate school. not only college, but graduate school, and graduating with a 4.0 GPA, where in high school I was barely making it. Like almost was like, I don't even know if I'm going to graduate. It was because of my mindset. It's because I thought I can't do it. And so I'm I would be, yeah, most proud about that. Like my academic achievements, really, like just maximizing my potential and seeing that nothing is impossible.
So, Jason, at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, fans, everyone that reads your books, clients, the kids, but you run the show. What's your
Mhm.
perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting because people will tell me all the time. They'll say that they think that I'm an extrovert because I you know produce a lot of content, and sometimes I speak about things and I'm very passionate about it. But even though there's some speculation on this, like whether or not the whole introvert extrovert thing is even a proper label to put on people, because no one is typically one way all the time. But yeah, I'm a very just like a relaxed, chill person. I don't like to be the center of attention, or like, the life of the party or anything like that. I'm most comfortable when I'm able to just, be in a quiet environment and, just like work on things. But yeah, so people are surprised about that typically. Um when they really do get to know me and say, "Oh, wow, I thought you were different. I thought you were a different way." But yeah, but one thing that maybe people don't know about me is just that I'm very passionate about helping others to not have to go through some of the things that I went through. And so people don't always see it, but I'm, constantly working on stuff, constantly thinking ahead, thinking about stuff that I want to do years down the road.
So the four-step biblical discernment framework, give me kind of the overview and what you're hoping the reader gets from this book.
Yeah, so this is birthed out of something that I think is pretty common today within the church, where you see people are believing things with good intentions, but they're believing things that are dangerous and that are destroying their lives. You have people who are listening to teachers who are telling them things like, hey, God told me to tell you to give me, $2,000,
Uh-huh.
and things like that. And people are giving their life savings and the deed to their house and maxing out credit cards to donate to churches, and doing things like that. And it's really sad to see people being manipulated like that. And I know that there's a lot of sincere people that just think, you know what, I'm just helping, I'm just trying to, do the work of the Lord, and I'm trying to support a ministry, but they don't realize they are being taken advantage of. And not only in those areas, but also in other situations where whole doctrines are created based on something that's not taught in the Bible, but is more of like a human tradition, and it gets passed down over the years through different people, like a game of telephone. And eventually people just have the wrong information, but no one is stopping to correct it. And the only way that you can do that, especially if we're talking about the Bible, is to go back to the Bible and say, well, I don't care what someone else said that the Bible said. I want to know, what does the Bible actually say? And so that's what the four-step biblical discernment framework does. And so it's like anytime you are hearing a sermon, or you're reading a book, or watching a YouTube video or anything, never just take it at face value and just assume that what you're hearing is correct. You don't have to be completely cynical and just you're questioning everything, and somebody's like good morning. It's like, oh, do you really care that my morning is good? Or, you don't have to be like that, but you should be aware at least because many people are naive and they don't think that people lie about something as serious as the Bible or about something that the Lord has said. And people assume, well, nobody would do something like that. Only a crazy person, an evil person would do that. But it happens every day. And so I really like to teach people to really just understand. And I put it in a very simple format. I try to make the book as short as I could because I wanted it to be something you could read in like an hour or less. But I break down just like some steps that you can implement, such as number one, knowing what the text actually says. Number two, understanding the text in context. Because if you don't understand the historical background or, the culture of that time, or even who the original audience was, you can interpret this as, oh, this is just a personal message for me, instead of looking at it like, all right, well, what did it mean to the original readers or hearers, and how can I apply it to my life without trying to make it about me?
Yeah.
And that's the thing, that people will try to, they look at themselves as the hero in the story, but in the Bible, God is the hero of the story. And so that's what I always like for people to understand as they're reading. It's not about me, it's not about you, but it ultimately is about him.
So if anybody wants to get a copy of the book, they want to dive into all of the content you're creating, anything and everything in your world, where do they go? Where's the best place?
Yeah, so to get the book, and you can download it for free, I wanted to make sure it's accessible to everyone. And you can get it on discerntheword.com.
Okay.
And so you can get that there. And then you can also check out my podcast. It just launched this week. It's called The Miseducation of God's People. And, I dive into a lot of those kind of topics on there as well.
Okay. I will put all these links in the show notes. I'll make it easy. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for taking a minute. I thank you for your story. Best of luck with everything. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Thanks a lot for having me on.
Yes, sir.
Yep. Hope we can do it again.
Yeah.